Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Abitchonistim. IDSF is a leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security to defend Israel. Thank you to all of our viewers. Thank you to all of our supporters for tuning into this briefing so that we can very much bring you behind the scenes what is happening here in Israel. You know, on these briefings, I always say that IDSF is advocating for strong national security. And people say, what does that mean, Moshe? What does it mean to advocate for national security? And by now, hopefully, many of you understand that we have a multi-pronged approach here at IDSF to really fight for Israel. There's a top-down approach and a bottom-up or a grassroots approach. And on the top-down, we very much work with policymakers here in Israel, whether they're in the Knesset, whether they are the top leadership of the military establishment, to push forward strong policies to make sure that Israel stays safe. And that's why General Avivi is always running around the country, meeting with people, making sure that his voice, that the voice of our leadership is heard. And then on the grassroots side, we, of course, engage, empower the Israeli population to understand what it means to have national security, to understand what it means to push our leaders for strong national security positions. And in that sense, we have a very robust education program and a grassroots movement. And I encourage everyone on this briefing today to make sure to tune in tomorrow, because tomorrow we're actually going to be down in the Gaza envelope area, highlighting a little bit of what we do on the education front, hearing from some of the people in that area what IDSF provides for the people who are very much living out this war here in Israel. So again, we operate top down. We operate grassroots. Tomorrow, we're going to focus on the grassroots. And of course, today, we're going to hear directly from General Avivi what he's doing on the top-down level to advance national security here in Israel. So that was a lengthy introduction, General. I hope you have a few minutes right now. You're where you need to be, and we can jump into this briefing. What can you share with us?
Yeah, so Moshe, I want to start by really talking about the hostage deal. I see a great confusion in the Israeli society. I don't know how it's perceived in the diaspora, in the US, but I think that I hear a lot of people saying, what's the problem? Let's go to stage 2. We have to prioritize bringing back the hostages. Let's get all the hostages, and then, we'll go back fighting. Sounds very simple and logic, but we have to remember that on the other side, there is a terror organization, a bunch of monsters. We've seen what they did to our hostages. We saw in the last release how terrible they treated our people, terribly. And this is what we're dealing with. And I think that in this sense, we have to understand that we are now in stage 1 of the hostage release. We took us 7 months to reach the point where we get Hamas to agree to a hostage deal. And this hostage deal includes releasing 33 hostages, while we are releasing many murderous terrorists into the West Bank, Judean Samaria, into other parts of the Middle East. Devastating situation. We left Netzarim corridor. We are basically enabling all the Gazans to go back to the north part of Gaza. We are paying a heavy price for that, but we want to get our hostages. Now, we're talking now about stage 2. Now, we have to understand that stage 2, basically it says the following. We want Hamas to get out of Gaza, to give us all the hostages, and to give up control of Gaza. Now, what would make Hamas agree to that? And this, we have like 2-3 weeks to get the deal. It took us 7 months to deal with the first part, and without President Trump saying that if they don't release hostages, there will be hell, we wouldn't be at this point. Now, we're starting negotiations. that in the beginning of March are supposed to be implemented. And basically, this is almost completely impossible to do. And then the question is, okay, what will happen on day 42? Now, I think that looking at what would be reasonable to expect, I would say maybe we can basically get an extension of stage one. Say to the Hamas, you know what? It's very hard to negotiate the second stage. Let's continue the first stage. You continue releasing hostages, and we'll continue giving terrorists back, and also extending the ceasefire and continuing to bring humanitarian aid. We are bringing in Gaza massive amounts of humanitarian aid. So maybe after we get our 33 hostages, we can continue and then get more and more, but then we'll have a ceasefire that will continue maybe a month, 2 months more. This is something that could happen. I don't know if it will happen. I'm not very optimistic. I think that I'm not sure even if Hamas will really release all the 33 hostages they're supposed to release. It's completely unclear. We don't know. We'll have to see. But this is something that actually can be done. On the other hand, what happens if they don't agree? If they don't continue hostages? In this scenario, the most reasonable scenario is that the IDF will go back fighting. This is probably what will happen, and the IDF is preparing for that. The IDF is preparing with new plans. We have a new chief of staff. We have new spirit, and the IDF is very resolute to win this war. We understand that we need to destroy Hamas and also bring our hostages. I think it's very hard to manage to get to the point where Hamas will release the hostages without renewing the attack on Hamas, without putting a lot of pressure, talking about the humanitarian aid, and changing completely the way we're dealing with humanitarian aid, disconnecting Hamas from it, creating a new reality in Gaza. And I think that this is what is probably going to happen. It will surprise me. I will be very happy to see it. But it will surprise me to see a smooth move from stage one to stage two, and Hamas simply saying, yes, you know what, we'll leave Gaza, we'll give you the hostages, we lay down our weapons, and transfer control of Gaza to somebody else. I think I'm not really optimistic that this is something that actually will happen. And there is all the time an argument saying, this is us, Israelis, it depends on us. And I said, no, it does not depend on us. Of course, we want our hostages. It depends on Hamas. Hamas needs to agree to these terms, and I think it's going to be very hard to reach a point like that. Moshe?
Thank you, General. It's very hard to see a reality wherein Hamas would release all of the remaining hostages, because at that point they no longer have leverage over Israel. And when you look at the statements of the families of the hostages over the weekend, kind of beseeching President Trump to continue pushing hard, suggesting that because of President Trump's push and statements that brought about this deal, and if he pushes even harder, more can come to fruition. In your assessment, is that in fact the case, that somehow the U.S. is the key to the negotiations or to the ability to allow the IDF to operate in Gaza, such that if the U.S. kind of releases some type of lever, pulls a lever, so to speak, that the hostages can come home?
The U.S. is one of the main reasons why we didn't manage to have a deal for so long, and the U.S. is the reason why we have a deal. After President Trump said there will be hell if they don't release hostages. Certainly the U.S. has a lot of leverage and can assist in many ways, and mostly by
equipping Israel, supporting Israel, saying we'll enable Israel to destroy Hamas, will help stopping the humanitarian aid, will relocate the Gazans. This is a lot of things that are putting a lot of pressure on Hamas. But Hamas is going to test this. Hamas is not going to just say, okay, game over, and we're leaving Gaza and that's it. We'll have to show on the ground that we mean what we say, and the US also means what it says. And this will be tested, and the test will happen at the end of stage one. Once we finish the first stage, if Hamas doesn't continue to release hostages, then we'll have to operate very, very strongly and put all the leverage we have. And certainly, I think that the US can not only pressure Hamas, but also pressure dramatically Egypt and Qatar to demand the release of hostages. And they will need a lot of pressure in order to do so. I'm very happy to see how strongly minded is President Trump in saying he wants to see them now and fast and release much faster. But this needs to be translated to concrete policies regarding Qatar, Egypt, and Hamas.
Okay, so speaking about Qatar and Egypt for a moment, right now, the decisions being made about the hostages or the operations of Hamas in Gaza, are they being really run by the lower level leadership within Gaza itself, or is Hamas still very much dependent on their leadership in Qatar and their relationships with other countries, such that pushing Qatar or Egypt really could make a huge difference?
I think that Sinwar inside Gaza is controlling very strongly what's going on, and the power is inside Gaza. They don't have a strong leadership outside, and therefore, if you don't implement military pressure and humanitarian pressure, it will be very hard to get Hamas to do what we want.
And then leaving aside Qatar for a second, what is the current nature of the relationship between Israel and Egypt in terms of the border between Israel and Gaza? I'm sorry, between Gaza and Egypt, in terms of Egyptian forces in the Sinai Peninsula. Where are we standing right now?
So during, I would say, the last 10 years, 20 years, maybe since Hamas started controlling Gaza, we demanded from the Egyptians to secure the border. And they kept saying, we cannot really secure it, we need more forces. And Israel agreed that Egypt will bring more forces to the Sinai Peninsula. But this today has gone out of control. The Egyptians have brought amount of forces that is way beyond anything that the peace agreement allows. And it's time Israel takes it seriously and do something about it. And we cannot have a reality where Egyptian army amasses in the Sinai Peninsula. It's not now with too many capabilities, but it has changed a lot. And this is something that will have to be discussed. And we want to see a withdrawal of forces from the Sinai Peninsula. And overall, I would say that if the IDF has said for long that it doesn't need to build itself anymore for big wars, for dealing with regular armies, only with terror armies, I think that the buildup of IDF looking in the next 20 years will have to take into account two big regular armies, Turkey and also Egypt, and build our forces according not to intentions, but capabilities. Looking at their capabilities and saying, okay, we have to be able to deal with capabilities like that, no matter what the intentions are. We don't really control intentions. We don't know what will happen in a year or 10 years. Nobody knows. We see how fast history is evolving and changing. And we'll have to be able to defend Israel against any future threat.
And just to clarify, would you say there is an imminent threat right now with the buildup of forces in Egypt, or this is a long-term concern?
No, I think it's a long-term concern. There are forces in the Sinai Peninsula that are not as big as an imminent threat, but it's definitely something we have to deal with.
There has been, of course, a lot of discussion about President Trump's plan for Gaza and the extent to which the Gazan population would leave Gaza, whether they would leave Gaza by force or by choice. What do you think on that issue? Do you think that if somehow the global community were to open up the floodgates and open up their countries for emigration from Gaza, do you think the Gazans would choose to leave, or are the Gazans really there with their claims against Israel, and it doesn't matter what opportunities are provided for them, they will never choose to leave anywhere, go anywhere else?
Well, I think that there is a huge motivation in Gaza to emigrate, and it's not new. It was there even before the war. Um, Today, General Gershon Cohen released an article with interesting numbers. He said that from 67, from the Six-Day War, all the way to the 7th of October, more than 1 million Palestinians emigrated. And this is the numbers they give, not our numbers. So there is always an incentive for immigration, and especially now in Gaza, looking at really the situation there, many people want to emigrate, and the Egyptians are blocking the borders. They're not letting them go out, and we need to solve this. It's either President Trump really puts pressure on Egypt to open the border, or we'll have to encourage them to go through Israel or through the Gazan shores. There are many solutions how to facilitate for Gazans who want to emigrate to emigrate. I think that at least 50% of them will choose to emigrate from Gaza. And if the message is, guys, we are not going to bring any money to this place, there will be no reconstruction, are not going to invest in electricity or bring humanitarian aid, we're not going to spend money on this, but we are willing to help you relocate, I think that definitely many people will choose to do so. And I think it's a good plan. It's a good solution for the long term.
Thank you. For all the arguments out there that the Gazan population will refuse and to leave Gaza,
Why would anybody, Moshe, why would anybody think that Gazans are different from any other Muslim in the Middle East? The only land I see Muslims really attached to is Berlin, maybe London. They are emigrating in millions. Why would anybody think that they are any different from any other Muslim living in the Middle East, or Africans emigrating from Africa, or South Americans emigrating to the US? There is massive global migration. And the Palestinians are not different from anybody else.
For sure, I was gonna add that the global population of the Palestinian community is larger outside of Israel than it is inside Israel. Whereas outside of Israel, people who associate with being Palestinian or Palestinian heritage is like 7, 8 million, which is far greater than the actual population here in Israel. General, let me ask you a slightly different question, and I want to, of course, thank all of our viewers who really send in these questions and allow us to ask what is relevant and guide these discussions. In terms of the aid, the supplies that are now moving into Gaza, how significant is this? How much is this going to set the IDF back when operations continue? Meaning, are we right now putting our soldiers in harm's way because we're quite literally fueling the enemy?
Well, of course, when the Hamas has time to reorganize, to regroup, when they get humanitarian aid, this makes for us things more difficult. But I think that the IDF is preparing to go back and fight in ways that will really help, preventing casualties and trying to do it the best way, the most effective way, and set back Hamas as soon as possible. Because when you have a month and a half to regroup, yes, they can do it to a certain extent, but we are also training, getting ready, preparing programs, equipping our soldiers, bringing massive amounts of munitions. And when the time comes, I'm sure that the IDF will reach all its missions.
Thank you, General, for sharing that. I know last week you shared with our audience, but I think it's important to share it again for anyone who missed the briefing. Your conversation with the incoming IDF Chief of Staff in terms of your optimism for what you think he will be able to accomplish. Can you share a little bit more of that with our audience?
Yeah, I've known Eyal for many years. He's a very talented officer, very resolute, and I think talking to him that he's really understanding that the people of Israel are looking up to him and demanding one thing: victory. We want to see the army winning this war. He knows he was elected for this purpose, and he certainly intends to meet the expectations of the people of Israel from him and from the government. I think he's the right guy at the right moment, and we'll see once he starts his position at the beginning of March, how he shapes the IDF, the spirit, the plans, everything needed to move forward with this military campaign.
Brigadier General Amir Avivi, thank you so much for joining this briefing. Thank you for all you're doing to lead Israel to victory. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.